A 13-year-old girl survived 40 days in the Amazon rainforest, surrounded by dangerous wildlife while caring for her 9-year-old sister, her 4-year-old brother, and a baby who just turned 1. On the 1st of May 2023, deep in the Colombian Amazon, a small Cessna carrying 7 people suddenly lost power. The engine failed, the nose dropped straight down, and the plane slammed into the rainforest below. After the violent impact, the dense forest went completely silent. The pilot, an accompanying indigenous leader, and the children's mother, Magdalena, were all killed. Only 4 children survived: 13-year-old Leslie, her 9-year-old sister Solange, her 4-year-old brother Tien, and baby Kristen, who was still entirely dependent on formula. The crash happened in a remote stretch of untouched Amazon rainforest. 3 layers of dense canopy blocked out the sky, keeping the ground dim even at high noon. Jaguars, venomous snakes, and disease-carrying mosquitoes lurked in the shadows. Even fully equipped soldiers and experienced professional trackers could easily get lost in that forest. But 13-year-old Leslie was never a helpless kid. She was indigenous, from the Huitoto people, and had grown up learning centuries of jungle survival knowledge passed down through her community. She knew exactly which wild fruits were safe to eat and which were poisonous, could use the direction of flowing water to navigate, and had learned to listen calmly to the forest instead of panicking. For the first 4 days after the crash, her mother was still alive. Trapped in the wreckage and knowing she didn't have much time left, she gave her oldest daughter one final instruction: get out of here and keep your brother and sister alive. Leslie didn't break down. She knew she couldn't afford to fall apart. She fought to pull the trapped baby out from under the wreckage and gathered every usable supply from the plane. The last of some cassava flour, baby formula, a flashlight, and a handful of small odds and ends. That small stash of supplies was the only thing that would get the children through the days ahead. She wrapped the baby securely against her chest and faced the hardest decision of the entire ordeal. Staying by the wreckage might make it easier for rescuers to find them, but it also meant staying beside the cold bodies of the people they'd lost, waiting in a clearing with dwindling supplies for a rescue that might never come. She'd just lost her mother, had a crying baby in her arms, 2 terrified younger siblings standing beside her, and the bodies of adults all around them. In the end, Leslie strapped the baby to her chest, took her brother and sister by the hand, said goodbye to the wreckage, and walked into the endless green forest. That single decision took the 4 children completely out of the search zone, turning them into an untraceable moving target somewhere in the vast rainforest. At that point, they still had 36 days left before rescue would finally come. Leslie relied on the survival knowledge bred into her, step by step, to keep them alive. She avoided the trap most adults fall into, walking in circles, and instead used the sound of running water and the slope of the land to find a stream, letting the children rest near it. Water was both a necessity for survival and a landmark that would never fail her. She followed everything her grandmother had taught her strictly, only picking fruit she knew was safe, and staying far away from anything unfamiliar. When night fell and predators and snakes came out, she'd lead her siblings into the hollow of a thick, ancient tree, build a simple shelter out of branches and leaves, and stay awake all night watching over her young family. The hardest part was caring for a baby who could do nothing for herself. There was no formula and no breast milk in the jungle, so Leslie had to figure out solutions on her own, mixing mashed fruit with water, crushing cassava flour, doing whatever it took to keep the baby alive. With no parenting guide and no adult to help her, this 13-year-old girl was forced to become a mother overnight. Every day at first light, she'd head out to search for food and supplies. She carefully rationed every bit of food they had, mashing the softest fruit into a paste for the toothless baby. When her 4-year-old brother's legs gave out from exhaustion, she'd carry the toddler in one arm and shield the baby with the other, pushing forward through the muddy jungle. She calmed her crying 9-year-old sister by keeping her distracted with small tasks, steadying her emotions and holding the whole group together. Night was the jungle's most dangerous enemy. Every single night, she'd curl up with her siblings inside a hollow tree, positioning her own body between the children and the darkness, staying awake the entire night, listening for predators moving nearby. There was no one to take a shift, no room for a single mistake. One moment of falling asleep could have led to disaster. Most adults, even with professional gear and maps, couldn't survive a week in that jungle. Leslie, carrying 3 young family members with her, made it through 40 straight days and nights. Leslie kept steadily leading her family toward areas where people might be, deliberately leaving footprints, discarded diapers, strands of hair, and hair ties along the way, hoping rescuers would find the trail. Colombian authorities had launched a search team the moment the plane went missing. On day 15 after the crash, officials found the wreckage and confirmed the deaths of the 3 adults, but found no trace of the 4 children, leading them to conclude the kids were still alive and drastically expand the search. 150 military personnel and 70 indigenous trackers, all familiar with the terrain, joined the search, with helicopters circling non-stop above the treetops. But the canopy, over 100 feet thick in places, blocked any view from the air, and sudden downpours kept washing away every trace, making each search effort incredibly difficult. Modern search technology was practically useless against this untouched rainforest. The military tried everything to reach the children, dropping bilingual flyers, emergency supplies, and survival whistles, clearing patches of forest, lighting up areas, and playing recordings of their grandmother calling out to them in their native language. The voice of a loved one drifted down through the leaves and echoed across the forest, but the sound bounced repeatedly off tree trunks, so the children below could only hear a vague, distant voice, never able to pinpoint where it came from. Search teams gradually found things the children had left behind: bottles, fruit pits, hair ties, makeshift shelters, and fragments of clues kept appearing, but none of them ever pinned down an exact location. That created the cruelest kind of distance. Rescue teams came within less than 100 meters of the children several times, agonizingly close, only to miss them again and again. Then came 2 devastating blows that nearly crushed everyone's hope. The first came from the search team's star performer, a Belgian Malinois named Wilson. Following his extraordinary sense of smell, Wilson broke free of his leash and bolted straight toward the children, vanishing into the deep forest. Everyone believed the breakthrough was finally at hand, but the dog never came back and was never heard from again. Not only had the search team failed to find the children, now they'd lost their most valuable search asset too. The second blow was a false alarm that briefly gave the entire country false hope. As more scattered clues came in, Rescue Command mistakenly believed the children had been found and rescued. Colombia's president announced the news publicly right away, and the whole country erupted from grief into celebration. But barely a day later, officials had to issue an urgent correction. The report was false, and the children were still missing. The hope that had just been ignited across the country was instantly crushed. The family was pulled back and forth between despair and hope, forced to relive the trauma a second time. In that unpredictable jungle, even good news turned out to be a lie. Later, from what the children described afterward, the search team learned the most heartbreaking truth of all. Wilson had actually found the 4 children a long time earlier. In that dark, terrifying jungle, the search dog had quietly stayed by their side for days, becoming the only source of warmth and comfort for 4 kids who lost their mother and were surviving entirely on their own. But in the end, the rainforest that swallowed everything took Wilson too. He lost his way back and was never seen again, gone somewhere in that vast sea of trees. That was the lowest point of the entire search. The baby quietly turned 1-year-old somewhere in that jungle, with no formula and no medical care. The false rescue report kept tearing at the nation's emotions. The star search dog was gone, and the exhausted search team began bracing for the worst. Only that 13-year-old girl never let go, never once gave up on the youngest member of her family in her arms. On the 9th of June 2023, indigenous trackers working alongside a military search team pushed deep into the forest and finally found 4 small but very much alive figures in a forest clearing. After being burned by false alarms before, the rescuers almost couldn't believe what they were seeing and approached slowly and carefully, afraid this reunion might just be another trick played by the jungle. All 4 children were severely malnourished, covered in insect bites, and too weak to stand on their own. But every one of them was still alive. Leslie held the baby tightly against her chest, her eyes still steady and unbroken. The news spread across the country, and the whole nation wept. Helicopters flew the 4 children to a military hospital in Bogota for treatment, finally bringing the nationwide search to an end. In the end, everyone understood the truth. This miracle wasn't luck. It happened because of one 13-year-old girl, Leslie. As for the search dog who'd stayed with 4 terrified children through their darkest nights, he was never found. Officials awarded him a medal and built a memorial in his honor, but the jungle never gave him back.